Hi all, let's look at the round 5 encounter between Kasparov and Hikaru Nakamura. So very interesting players to check out at Blitz. E4 from Kasparov, and we enter into a Scotch game, D4 here instead of the standard royal pairs. So E takes, knight takes D4, we have bishop C5. Kasparov protects that, we have queen F6, C3, pretty standard stuff. Bishop C4. After knight E5, usually the bishop blocks back here, but Kasparov is playing bishop B3 here. D6. Both sides now castle. F3, depriving black of that G4 square. The knight comes to put pressure on D4. We have King H1 getting away from this potentially dangerous diagonal. The bishop drops back. Now knight A3, there's some pressure being exerted here on the queen side potentially. We have King H8, Queen D2. This sets up potentially Bishop G5, which could be useful under certain circumstances, as well as supporting that bishop. So at the moment, no loose pieces in Kasparov's position. Knight A5. Now here, Knight DB5, Kasparov is trying to weaken C7 here. If he can take, then he's got access to C7. But also if black took like that, then D6 would be weak. So this is putting pressure basically immediately now on black's pawn chain. Bishop takes E3, queen takes E3. Now we have queen E7. Too dangerous to take this pawn. It looks as though the knight would just be trapped. It doesn't seem worth it anyway. Kasparov actually just drops his bishop here. And there's a prospect potentially of playing F4 one day. But for the moment, after A6, now we have knight D4. White has a strong looking position in the center. It looks as though black's got a little, what's called a little pawn center, this pawn on D6. But white's got potential inertia with F4 to just be worried about. A compromising move, it seems. C5, knight E2. Black structure has been weakened by this, but we have this forcing move that's taken, and that knight was only on the rim. It was a bit of a dumb knight on the rim. The rim is dim, so to speak. So what's the idea? The queen just drops back, protecting B2. We have a hyper aggressive F5, trying to put pressure on Kasparov's center. The knight is evicted, and now just C4 clamping down against D5, so keeping this pawn as a backward pawn here potentially on this D file. F takes, bishop takes E4, not wanting an isolated pawn. Nice bishop there pointing on that diagonal and in all directions. Bishop F5. Now knight G3, bishop takes, knight takes. Now here D5 is discouraged because C5 would be weak. We could just take and then take on C5. We have rook AD8, rook E1, threatening discovery. Knight takes C5, for example. Rook FE8, so that any knight move there's queen takes E1 check potentially. Queen D2. Now the queen has to get out of the way. Queen F8. We have knight G5 lurking over black's king on H7, but also knight E6 threatened. Queen F6 defending the E6 square. But this is still really dangerous. This knight on the 5th, which hasn't been evicted here, is a very, very dangerous piece. And Kasparov capitalizes on this. He takes on E8. And now a very, very strong move indeed in this position. Can you see what white plays? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Okay, Kasparov played rook E1, tapping into black's weakened back row. By the way, it might be tempting, it's not really tempting to do anything else rather, because the queen's looking at A1 here anyway. If we just rewind this position for a moment, this rook takes E8, we have left the A1 rook loose, so Yeah, that's important not to lose the rook. But also you might have considered queen takes d6, but that fails obviously because of the rook. And even if it didn't, queen takes g5, just avoiding this knight is not really great, allowing a rook to the 7th. But this rook's hanging here, so we have rook e1. So black's back row is weakened now. This knight cannot be taken. Queen e8 is mating. Knight d7. Check. Knight f8. Black is passive. We have h3, giving the king some air. Otherwise, yeah, queen a1 is embarrassing. King g8. Both sides struggling with their back row. Knight e4. Queen f4. We have queen e7. This pawn is quite vulnerable here. Yeah, this is a very vulnerable pawn. And in fact here, after check, Kasparov is not interested in a perpetual check scenario. He plays for a win here, king f2. We have check, and yeah, this pawn structure looks more vulnerable than white's in this position. h5, as though h4 check might be a useful resource. Yep, taking that pawn up. And yes, this is desperate, another pawn. Knight g6 for a little bit of temporary activity. Queen e4, queen f6. The knight just comes to f5 here, so safeguarding a lot of key squares. Check. Knight f4 threatening mate. Just g3 though. Knight h5. Black's not even threatening anything. The knight's defending g3. Just f4 now. And now Kasparov sympathized with queen d5 check. He's 2 pawns up. Yeah, he's made Nakamura look like quite pedestrian, quite ordinary. After queen takes, either c takes is good, but this is flashier. Knight e7 check, and white is 2 pawns up. Hikaru Nakamura resigned here. Incredible stuff. It's as if Nakamura really didn't get much counterplay. His pawn structure was compromised. The Scotch game in particular, putting scrutiny on black's queen side later. So supporting the bishop supported knight db5, so putting pressure on b6, c7 and d6 earlier. Black was saddled with this weakness on d6 for much of the game, and that was the first pawn to really go. So yeah, the wheels came off black's position there. But what a fantastic example of the Scotch game as a dangerous weapon in blitz chess. And this set the scene, of course, for a later round encounter, which you can see on the channel already. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.